Because they investigated the case and they found out that there was actually a Sergey Ponomarenko that was declared missing in Kyiv in 1960. They also were able to track down the woman in the photograph, his girlfriend, who was now over 70 years old at this point.
According to the document, Sergey was born in Kyiv in 1932. That should make him 74 years old, but here he was looking no older than 25.
She told the police that Sergey had disappeared that day in 1958, but returned just a few days later, the exact amount of time that he had been in 2006.
New discoveries are making people rethink time, spurred by exciting tales and debates among scientists about time travel. The story of Sergey Ponomarenko challenges our understanding of time. Could strong evidence that Sergey came from decades ago change what we believe is possible? The facts we're uncovering are more fascinating than you might expect, and Sergey's bewildering case is just the beginning. A Soviet ID and a camera from the past. Some people may have crossed paths with someone from a completely different time without realizing it. This man, Sergey Ponomarenko, was once stopped by police and asked for his ID. What he handed them was a document from a country that no longer exists, the Soviet Union. Some ideas seem impossible throughout history, and time travel is probably one of the most puzzling. But there's strong evidence that as recently as 2006, a man from the 50s appeared, while another person claimed to have visited 2045 and came back with troubling predictions about the future. Who is this mysterious time traveler, and what does his story say about the challenges of time travel? Stick around as we uncover the big surprises his journey might tell us about what's coming next for us. On April 23, 2006, Sergey was first seen on a street in Kiev, Ukraine. He was wearing an old Soviet military uniform and carrying a very old camera, which caught a lot of attention. His clothes stood out even more because of the sensitive history between Ukraine and Russia, even before their recent conflicts. It was as shocking as if someone were wearing a Nazi uniform in Israel. It was sure to upset anyone who saw it. People around him were clearly worried, which made Sergey nervous and caused him to act even more strangely. Fortunately, a police patrol was nearby, and they decided to see what was going on. When the police asked for his ID, they were shocked to see a document from the Soviet Union, a country that had ceased to exist years ago. Many years before, Ukraine had separated from the Soviet Union and became its own independent country, so any identification from the Soviet era would be old and unusable. But this situation was strange because the man didn't look like someone in their 70s. Instead, he appeared to be in his 20s, which made the whole thing even more confusing. The police also noticed something odd about his ID. It said he was born in 1932, yet his photo on the ID looked just like how he appeared that day, young and full of energy. The ID seemed completely real, with the official Soviet seal, and it showed that his name was Sergey Ponomarenko, born in Kiev. This left the officers puzzled. According to his ID, Sergey should have been 74 years old, but he looked like he was only in his 20s or early 30s. When the officers casually asked Sergey what the date was, he confidently said it was April 23, 1958. At this point, the officers started to think that Sergey might need to see a doctor, even though he insisted that he was fine. His constant talk about the Soviet Union just made them more unsure about his mental state. In the end, Sergey was given two choices: either go to jail or have a psychological evaluation. He chose the second option and was taken to a mental health facility. Once they arrived, Sergey met with Dr. Paul Kov, a psychologist. After hearing from the police, Dr. Kov took Sergey to his office. Sergey seemed amazed by everything around him, looking at the objects in the room as if they were totally new to him. During their chat, Sergey kept saying that he was born on June 16, 1932, and that he was only 25 years old, making the situation even more surreal. Sergey explained that his love for photography was why he always carried his camera. During a walk, he photographed a bell-shaped object in the sky and instantly found himself transported to unfamiliar streets in Kiev. Intrigued, Dr. Kov examined Sergey's Yashima Flex camera, an outdated model last produced in the 70s. To further investigate, Dr. Kov enlisted Vadim Po, a professional photographer, to help analyze the camera and its contents. Vadim was surprised to see that the camera, a Yashima dual-lens reflex from 1953, was indeed working and had been capturing Sergey's actions. Vadim also noticed that the film inside, which dated back to 1956, was in surprisingly good condition. At first, Vadim thought Sergey might just be a camera collector, as some people like to use old models. But what made things more confusing was the combination of old and new features on the camera. Even more puzzling was the fact that the type of film in the camera hadn't been available for decades. This suggested that the camera was either incredibly well preserved or that something stranger was going on. The camera seemed like a mix of history and mystery, leaving everyone wondering if Sergey's story of time travel could actually be true. Could it be more than just a wild story? It was starting to seem like there was something deeper at play. Sergey had been alone in the room, and there was no way he could have left through any normal exit. The security cameras showed him there 1 second, and the next he was gone, vanished into thin air. This strange disappearance only made his story more mysterious, especially when considering the old camera he had with him. The film inside was in perfect condition, even though it was decades old and hadn't been specially preserved. When the photos were developed, they showed images of Kiev as it looked back in the 50s, including one clear picture of Sergey standing in front of a building dated 1956. Dr. Kov and Vadim, now even more confused, carefully went through the rest of the photos. Among them was a picture of the bell-shaped object Sergey had described, floating in the sky just as he said. The image was clear and unmistakable, showing this strange UFO in the skyline of a long-gone era. Dr. Kov couldn't deny what he was seeing. Sergey's story seemed to be backed up by actual evidence. Could it be that Sergey really was a traveler from another time, brought to the present by the very photograph he had taken? A tragic vanishing act. Faced with these photos, the people who had first doubted Sergey's story had to rethink their initial reactions. More questions started to surface. How could an old camera from the 50s take a picture of something that seemed futuristic? And how had Sergey vanished from a room under constant surveillance without leaving a single clue? The security team and hospital staff searched through every second of the footage, trying to find something they might have missed. Anything that could explain how Sergey had disappeared so suddenly. But they found nothing. The mystery of Sergey Ponomarenko left everyone puzzled, raising big questions about the nature of time and whether it was possible to travel through it. Sergey had always been a bit mysterious about that strange day, only ever saying that it was unlike any other, filled with things he could barely understand himself. Dr. Paul and the team investigating his case were surprised at how much the photographs matched with Valentina's memories of that time. Valentina's detailed descriptions added more pieces to the puzzle of Sergey's story. She talked about how Sergey had always been curious about the unknown, and how his sudden disappearance had deeply affected their lives. The photo Dr. Kov found, showing Sergey with Valentina in 1958, perfectly matched the one from the old camera. This made the whole situation even more believable. With this new evidence, the police worked harder to figure out what had really happened. The fact that Sergey had reappeared as suddenly as he had vanished made them think there might be some truth to his claims of time travel, something that modern science hadn't yet explained. Dr. Kov, now fully involved in the case, began to think about what Sergey's experience could mean for our understanding of time and reality. Was it possible that Sergey had accidentally become part of some unknown scientific phenomenon? The idea that time travel might be real was becoming harder to ignore. The search for Sergey continued, with every clue pointing to a man who had somehow crossed the usual limits of time and space. His current whereabouts were still unknown, leaving everyone involved in the investigation wondering what his story really meant. Sergey Ponomarenko's life and his unexplained disappearance had now captured the attention of both scientists and investigators, making people question what we really know about time and human experience. There's a theory out there that suggests time loops could be possible within the rules of Einstein's general relativity. It's a complicated idea, still mostly theoretical, but it offers a possible scientific explanation for cases like Sergey's, where someone seems to move through different periods in time. In Sergey's case, his strange behavior when he claimed he was stuck in 2006 and then disappearing again, followed by what looked like a message from the future, adds more to the confusion. He was hesitant to share details about what happened to him, and his eventual confession to Valentina only deepened the mystery. It seemed like whatever he went through was both amazing and unsettling. Scientists are still debating how time travel could actually work. Some think it could happen through wormholes, while others suggest quantum entanglements. These ideas all provide different ways time travel might happen without breaking the laws of physics. But for now, no one has been able to prove these theories or put them into practice. The handwritten note on the back of the photo Sergey sent to Valentina hints that he might have some control over his time travels. This could mean he knows more about time travel or has access to technology that we don't understand yet. The photo itself shows an older Sergey in what looks like a future that hasn't happened yet. This image adds another layer of mystery and makes his claims seem more real. As people continue to look into Sergey's story and the possibility of time travel, the interest from both scientists and researchers grows. Whether or not we will ever fully understand or prove Sergey's story is unclear, but it has certainly sparked new ideas about what's possible when it comes to time and space. His story doesn't just fascinate people, it pushes us to think harder about what might be scientifically possible in the future. There's a belief that our interest in time travel reflects a deep desire to break free from the limits of time and explore what might be possible beyond the present. This curiosity shows our ongoing quest to understand and maybe even control time, something that ties into bigger questions about our existence and what it means to shape our own future. The idea of closed time loops in science also connects with philosophical debates. Some theories suggest that the universe might naturally fix any issues that arise from time travel, which brings up the question, is everything already determined? This concept touches on the age-old debates about fate and free will. The challenges that come with time travel, like the famous grandfather paradox, make us think deeply about cause and effect. For example, if someone could go back in time and change something important, like a major historical event, it raises big questions about our responsibility to history and the future. Looking into time travel doesn't just help us learn more about the universe, it also makes us think about who we are and our place in the world. It's a mix of science, philosophy, and imagination that encourages us to think about reality in new ways, exploring the boundaries of time. As scientists continue to explore these ideas, Sergey Ponomarenko's story stays in our minds as a fascinating example of the mysterious connection between time, memory, and what it means to be human. Whether his story is true or just an interesting tale, it makes us wonder about the complexities of time travel and how it might help us understand the world around us. It's through these kinds of explorations that we push the boundaries of what's possible, always driven by the desire to go beyond the limits of what we know and explore the extraordinary. Space and time, or what scientists call space-time, bend and stretch around really heavy objects like planets or stars. This bending is what we feel as gravity. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, gravity can even affect time itself. For example, clocks near a massive planet run slower than clocks in places with less gravity. This connection between gravity, time, and movement is key to understanding how time travel might work. Imagine if someone were to orbit a black hole at a safe distance. Because of the black hole's intense gravity, time would move much slower for that person compared to someone far away from it. This is what some call gravitational time travel. Now, thinking about Sergey Ponomarenko's case, if his time travel story is true, it might line up with some ideas from general relativity. If Sergey somehow came across a very advanced machine or object that could create a strong gravitational field or warp space-time, it could explain how he appeared to move across decades in what felt like an instant. Sergey's story taps into something that has always fascinated people: the idea of time travel. It blurs the line between what we think is just science fiction and what might actually be possible someday. His experience, as strange as it sounds, makes us rethink how we understand time and whether our current technology and science are just scratching the surface. All the ongoing studies and debates about time travel and space-time don't just teach us more about the universe. They also inspire us to imagine new possibilities and push the limits of what we think can be done. Even if time travel never becomes real, the search for answers can lead to discoveries that could change how we see the universe and our place in it. Dr. Kov's reflections open up a fascinating possibility. What if Sergey traveled through time because of an advanced technology, maybe even extraterrestrial, that interacts with the rules of space-time? If there are civilizations more advanced than us, they might have found ways to manipulate space-time in ways we can barely imagine. The idea of such technology is mind-blowing. If Sergey did come across a UFO that could bend gravitational fields, it could mean that this kind of technology, while far beyond our current abilities, is actually possible within the laws of physics we already know, like general relativity. It makes us wonder if encounters with extraterrestrial beings might involve more than just learning from them. Maybe they also mess with time itself. Dr. Kov's idea that Sergey might have accidentally traveled through time because of a close encounter with this kind of technology brings up a lot of questions. What responsibilities would these advanced civilizations have if they could do such things? Should there be rules or protocols for how interstellar travel or even time travel is handled? This whole line of thinking shows just how important it is to keep exploring and understanding the universe, especially when it comes to time and space. The more we expand our knowledge, the closer we might get to unlocking the mysteries behind stories like Sergey's. Are they just imaginative tales, or are they glimpses into a much more complex reality than we know today? Stories like Sergey's keep both scientists and everyday people curious. Whether or not time travel becomes something we can actually do, these stories push us to think about the endless possibilities that the universe might hold. They challenge what we believe is possible and encourage us to dive deeper into the mysteries of space-time. The story of Sergey's time travel and his strange encounters, though fascinating and detailed, is really a work of science fiction as seen in the Ukrainian TV series Aliens. The series dives into the limits of human knowledge and our ongoing curiosity about the unknown, especially when it comes to extraterrestrial life and time travel. Each episode, including the one about Sergey, plays with these themes to spark our imagination. The show makes it clear that these are fictional stories based on what-if scenarios, not real events. The show uses ideas from theoretical physics, advanced alien technology, and time travel to keep viewers thinking about what might be possible if we could solve certain scientific challenges. It encourages people to question the limits of what we currently know and to dream about what we might discover in the future. Even though Aliens is a dramatized show based on speculative science, it reminds us how entertaining these ideas can be. At the same time, it makes us think about the huge areas of science we still haven't explored or fully understood. The time travel shown in the series is exciting and fun to think about, but with the technology and knowledge we have today, it remains out of reach. By mixing facts with fiction, science fiction like this opens up interesting discussions about what future technologies might look like and the challenges they could bring. The idea of time travel, whether it's ever possible or not, continues to inspire both scientific research and creative storytelling. Our fascination with time travel reflects a deep human desire to explore the unknown and understand the mysteries of life, constantly pushing the limits of what we believe is possible. While time travel is still more fiction than fact, stories like Sergey's keep us thinking about what could be. They inspire future scientists and thinkers to take what seems impossible today and turn it into tomorrow's reality. Could Sergey's startling reappearances and the mysterious objects captured in his photographs signify a breakthrough in time travel, or are they just clever fabrications? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.
The Missouri time traveler who vanished after 1997. Mike Markham, a 21-year-old electrical engineering student living in Stanberry, Missouri, wanted to build a time machine in early 1995. He had this strange goal of getting rich by going to the future and getting winning lottery numbers. He had no real formal training in that area of study. He did most of his experiments in his house's backyard, which was very messy and could be easily mistaken for a dumpster for home appliances, with parts of old TVs, radios, and CDs scattered all over the place. As he was messing around with a device called Jacob's Ladder, he noticed something strange. Mike was tinkering with Jacob's Ladder, which he had modified. It had a home-built electronic transformer with a power of 20,000 volts. He had to create this transformer because the standard household voltage in the US is 120 to 240 volts. He used wire hangers and lasers for the conductors on Jacob's Ladder to heat the air around the conductor and take care of air pressure and temperature changes, which could easily ruin the experiment. While working with the device, Mike claimed to have seen a circular vortex 8 inches across. He figured he would test the effect by repeatedly throwing in a sheet metal screw to see what would happen. According to him, every time he threw it in, something bizarre happened. The screw would disappear, only to reappear a second later, a few feet away. He had the opinion that the metal screw had been transported through time, reappearing when time had finally caught up. Seeing what had happened with this experiment, which seemed to be an obvious success, Mike was determined to push further with his goal. He would build a time machine that would be 8 feet instead of the 8-inch Jacob's Ladder, which he had used for the initial experiment. But a great challenge stood imposingly ahead of him. He required an insane amount of power to advance his research to the point where it could work for humans. Furthermore, things didn't seem to go his way because the device went up in flames while he was scaling up his work on the so-called time machine. Mike was unbothered, though. He reasoned that using bigger transformers to produce higher voltages would be more sensible if he were to rebuild the machine. But that would set him back around $20,000 per transformer. But money wouldn't stop him. So what did he do? He broke into a local power plant and stole 6 old transformers to continue his work. If he thought he could avoid the police, then he was grossly mistaken. The moment he attached the transformers to Jacob's Ladder, he sparked a massive blackout on the streets in his neighborhood, shutting down the electrical grid for several hours. Soon after, the cops found their way to his home with a warrant to search it, and they took him into custody for stealing the transformers. During his trial, Mike reportedly admitted to the judge that he was attempting to find the lottery-winning numbers to raise money for a research facility. After his release from prison a few months later, he became quite a well-known figure on local radio by sharing tales of the missing screw and his ambition to create a time machine. Art, the host of Art Bell's radio show, the radio show that frequently touched on paranormal topics, quickly labeled Mike a madman and happily took up the moniker. The strange tale of Madman Mike is documented on the radio station's website. While on air, Mike informed Art and his audience that he needed more money and spare parts to conduct his research. He even went as far as broadcasting his phone number live, after which he supposedly received non-stop calls from different people for the next 3 days. His next machine invention was more ambitious and powerful than the first, thanks to donations from his listeners. He intended to use the device to test it by producing an electromagnetic vortex large enough for a person to walk through. When Mike returned to the radio show a year later, he was asked what he would bring along on his supposed time travel journey. He indicated that he would just bring his phone into the time machine. In 1996, when he appeared on the show, he claimed to be 30 days away from completing his legal time machine, so people waited for the outcome. In 1997, however, he suddenly vanished without warning and was never heard from again, placing him at the center of one of the greatest mysteries involving time travel. Not long after his disappearance, one radio show's listeners called to share an odd tale they had stumbled upon. The tale has it that police discovered a deceased man on a California beach in the 1930s. The man had been crushed to death inside an odd metal tube, and a strange object that resembled a cell phone had been discovered next to his corpse. But strangely enough, Mike seemed to reappear online in 2022, refuting wild rumors that he had died after traveling to the 1930s. Furthermore, there were reports that his local radio station interviewed him for the third time in 2015. In February of that year, Mike appeared to post on a blog about paranormal activity using the username Realmadman Markum. The user had been registered with the website since 2015. According to him in his post, rumors are blaming that he was dead, not well, and had time traveled to 1930, somewhere where he died on a beach in a tube. He claimed that whoever posted those pictures of a redhead was also not him. Some school kid had used his name, which someone long ago attributed to me. Whatever was found in the 1930s was not him, and even though he read that it was debunked, he couldn't find the article. When asked about his future intentions for a time machine, in his response, he said he indeed had plans, but they were stalled until he could get some inventors. He said he had some 24 V panels in his bus for a project. They got a little rusty from sitting outside for a bit. While his followers have urged him to prove that he is the actual Mike Madman, he has yet to provide any. As such, whether the real Mike Markum still exists is still a mystery. While some people waved the whole thing off by speculating that the guy had just changed his name and chose to live a low-key life away from the spotlight, some others believe his experiment with the time was successful. Many scientists do not believe that time travel is possible, but in theoretical physics, several hypotheses and theories suggest that traveling through time may be doable, but with some major challenges. The sudden slowing down of time. One prominent theory supports the possibility of time travel. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, time is fundamentally linked to space in what is popularly called space-time. When particularly massive objects get near gravitational fields, they can cause the slowing down of time, known as time dilation. This phenomenon has been demonstrated by experiments involving atomic clocks in fast-moving planes or strong gravitational fields. Certain exotic solutions, such as closed time-like curves or CTCs, have been proposed to help people travel back in time. CTCs are hypothetical space-time loops that allow objects or people to theoretically travel to the past and return to the same place and time where they started. The Gödel metric, one of the solutions to the general relativity equation, suggests the possibility of rotating worlds that could support CTCs. However, this does not mean that CTCs, as a solution, are without problems. CTCs give way to paradoxes, such as the well-known grandfather paradox, in which individuals prevent their existence or create illogical conclusions. Solving such paradoxes requires careful examination of the consistency and causality of space-time. By way of solution, some physicists at MIT have created theories suggesting the use of quantum teleportation and post-selecting what a time traveler could and could not do, as a way to avoid the grandfather paradox, but it is still very theoretical. Another level of difficulty for time travel is quantum mechanics, a fundamental concept in quantum physics. The uncertainty principle, also known as Heisenberg's indeterminacy principle, suggests that there are innate limitations to the accuracy with which some pairs of properties, such as position and momentum, may be simultaneously known or measured. Certain interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that there are alternate timelines, or parallel universes, where every potential outcome of a quantum event takes place. There are more scientific hypotheses than ever that add credibility to the possibility of other universes existing in parallel to our own. Still, one of the most controversial scientific theories is the multiverse theory. The cosmos in which we live is incredibly huge. There are galaxies with billions or trillions of stars within them. According to some scientists examining models of the universe may be 7 billion light-years in circumference. However, certain scientific theories have investigated and, in some cases, validated the idea that there are worlds outside, parallel to our own, that mirror our own, and go beyond what is visible to us in the physical time we live in. Various arguments about multiverses and parallel universes are frequently discussed with other important scientific theories, like string theory and the famous Big Bang theory. It is important to note that these concepts do not support the idea of intergalactic travel, as that is largely seen as impossible. But even if intergalactic travel was somehow possible, would that be considered time travel? Even with these fascinating theories, there have been several other obstacles in the way of time travel. One such obstacle is that the energy requirements for time travel pose significant challenges because current technology is not at the necessary level, particularly for traveling through CTCs and exotic matter. While time travel to the past requires wormholes, time travel to the future would require traveling at the speed of light. The reason both kinds of time travel are so challenging to achieve is fairly simple on paper. Mankind has not advanced to the point in technology where we can make objects go faster than light, and there are no working wormhole machines. Also, travel theories often hammer on the need for negative mass or energy, and neither can be found in our universe. Although some physicists have theorized the possibility of a time machine that does not need negative matter, that machine would still need more energy than the entire universe could hold. Furthermore, the idea of quantum gravity is largely theoretical due to the absence of supporting data and our limited understanding. Regarding time travel, we constantly deal with concepts and energy that we do not even understand, let alone use. Time-traveling ideas are far more complex than we currently understand. As such, time travel, even as a scientific consideration, is more or less speculative. There is simply more to time travel than just hopping in a time machine, punching in the destination's date, and zooming in on some distant past. Despite the lack of undeniable scientific proof that time travel is possible, there have been notable stories of people who claimed to have accidentally traveled to a time different from theirs. Sir Victor Goddard, the man who accidentally traveled to the future. It was said that Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard accidentally traveled 4 years into the future. In 1935, while serving as a wing commander, Sir Goddard was tasked with examining an abandoned airbase in Drem, Scotland, relatively close to Edinburgh. Sir Goddard observed this base from above while flying and noticed the place was a huge mess. He saw that cattle were grazing on wild grass, growing unchecked through the numerous cracks of the tarmac. The airbase was completely deserted and was in terrible condition from complete neglect. Sir Goddard encountered a strange storm while flying his biplane. Strong winds and storm clouds with a strange brownish-yellow hue overtook his aircraft. This bizarre phenomenon caused him to lose control of his plane, and it began to spin into a fall. However, with some effort, he managed to gain control of the plane and flew out of the storm into brilliant sunlight. A horrible, stormy day suddenly turned into a calm, beautiful, bright day. As if that wasn't weird enough, he also observed that the ruined airbase, which he had previously inspected, was now in perfect condition and was no longer deserted. He saw some mechanics in blue coveralls working on yellow planes parked on the runway. However, the strange thing that left him utterly confused was that the aircraft were different from those the Air Force had in 1935. Interestingly enough, Sir Goddard needed to learn to identify one of the planes. It was completely beyond his understanding. How could any renovation work have been completed in such a short amount of time? The surprises were not over. These mechanics were not even wearing the standard khaki uniforms that mechanics in the military wore in 1935. It was also confusing that the planes were yellow because the Air Force painted all its planes silver. Sir Goddard must have made every effort to explain away the unusual experience, but when he returned to Drem 4 years later, amid a European war, he was in for the shock of his life. He saw exactly what he had seen 4 years earlier at the airbase he had inspected 4 years ago. He saw the same mechanics in blue coveralls working on the same yellow planes. He even found the plane he had not been able to recognize before, the Miles Magister. Many skeptics have said that Sir Goddard must have gotten confused. They believe he landed somewhere else in 1935, not at the abandoned airbase in Drem. But that does not explain away the many details of his incredible story. The Miles Magister, for example, had its first flight in 1937, 2 years after Sir Goddard had seen it on the runway in Drem. The colors of the mechanic uniforms and the planes were only in use years later. The strange storm that suddenly went away and revealed a bright sunny day. All these points to a supernatural experience that cannot simply be explained away. Sir Goddard was one of many people who claimed to have traveled in time. Another accidental instance happened when 3 people claimed to have seen a time traveler in the past. The odd occurrence. On Highway 167, Time Traveler, a story by Ken Moe, was published in Strange Magazine 2. According to that short story, on October 20th, 1969, a man known simply as LC, alongside his business partner Charlie, was driving from Abbeville, Louisiana, where they had lunch, along Highway 167 towards the oil center city of Lafayette, Louisiana. It was exactly 1:30 p.m. on a beautiful day, with a clear blue sky and a cool 60 degrees Celsius. As such, they had the windows down and were in cruise mode. While driving down the free highway, they noticed a slowly approaching vehicle. They thought nothing of it until it got close to them, and they noticed the car. It was rather strange. Seeing the old turtleback type auto, they were immediately intrigued. Now, despite looking like an antique and a relic from the past, the car was in brand new condition, like something you would see if you visited an antique showroom. Curious about this car, LC and his business partner looked at it as they drew closer. They noticed it had a large orange license plate that distinctly stood out with the year 1940 plastered on it. They immediately figured this kind of antique car could not be legally allowed on the road, except perhaps for ceremonial purposes. LC took a closer look at the driver of this vehicle and was surprised to see that she was a young lady in really strange clothing. She wore a vintage dress from the 1940s, complete with a hat adorned with colored feathers and a fur coat that looked so out of place in 1969. A small child in a large, heavy coat and cap stood on the passenger's seat. It was hard to guess the child's gender because of the manner of dressing. Beyond the fact that such a style of clothing was completely out of fashion in 1969, it was also strange that they were wearing such heavy clothes in such cool weather. It also made no sense that the lady had her windows rolled up when she could have enjoyed the cool breeze. Elsie and Charlie pulled up to the car and were alarmed at the look of terror and panic on the lady's face. She looked completely distressed and looked back and forth as if she were lost or in dire need of assistance. Elsie called out to ask if she needed help, and she nodded yes. She seemed to be confused while studying Elsie's car. Older cars from the 1940s sat higher than those of the 1960s, like the one Elsie was driving. So the woman looked down at them. Perhaps because the lady had her windows rolled up, she seemed to be struggling to hear Elsie and Charlie. At some point, LC gestured for her to park at the side of the road, and after repeating the gesture a few times, she seemed to understand. However, to their surprise and absolute shock, there was no sign of the lady when they halted at the side and turned to see her. She seemed to have disappeared from the road. Now, Highway 167 is an open road with nowhere to hide a car, so it was quite surprising that there was no sign of her or her car. She had vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, what added credibility to the story was that a vehicle behind the antique car stopped in front of them. The car's driver hurriedly came to their vehicle to ask what had happened to the car in front of him. He was so confused that he thought an accident had occurred between LC's and the antique car. The three men exchanged stories of what they had just witnessed. The third man, who had come from out of town, wanted them to go to the police because he believed it was a missing persons case. However, LC and his friend refused because they did not know where the lady and the child had gone or where they came from. The three exchanged numbers and addresses, and for years they kept in touch to confirm that what they had seen was not just a figment of their imagination. It is yet to be explained whether the lady and her child were time travelers from 1940 or were forever stuck in limbo, appearing in different timelines but never returning to their own. While LC, his business partner, and the third man witnessed a time traveler from the past, these two newsmen witnessed a news story 11 years before it happened. Witnessing a news story 11 years before it actually happened. Authors Ron Edwards, C.B. Colby, and John Macklin, in the Little Giant Book of Eerie Thrills and Unspeakable Chills, document the strange story of two men who witnessed an event 11 years before it happened. In 1932, reporter J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt were working on a feature story, and for that reason, they were out covering the Hamburg shipyard in Germany. After finishing their mission, just as they were about to leave the building, they heard the sound of aircraft engines and looked up to find an astonishing sight of the sky full of fighter planes. The anti-aircraft batteries had come into action as bombs were being dropped and detonated. In a flash, the peaceful area had transformed into a full-blown war zone. Things were exploding everywhere, and buildings were crumbling on impact, leading to mayhem and death. Before running outside to save their lives, Hutton had asked a security guard if there was anything they could do to help, but was told to vacate the area immediately. Unsure of what was happening and afraid for their lives, the two men drove towards Hamburg. But as they got into Hamburg, they noticed that things had changed. The sky had cleared up, and everything was back to normal. The chaos and violence were completely gone, as though nothing had ever happened. The buildings that were supposed to have crumbled were perfectly fine, and no one seemed panicked. It was almost as if they had not just been running from massive airstrikes. When Hutton and Brandt looked behind towards the shipyard, they couldn't spot anything out of place. There was no damage, no smoke coming from the buildings. Nothing. The two men reported the bizarre incident, but as expected, the newspaper office did not believe their tale, and who can blame them? Brandt, who had quickly shown the photos he had been taking during the attack, was shocked to see that everything appeared normal in them. Their co-workers did not believe them, dismissing their wild tale of woe. Shortly before the start of World War II, Bernard Hutton relocated to London. However, what he read in a newspaper one morning in 1943 left him in utter shock. He must have thought someone was playing a horrible prank on him. The story he was reading was very detailed about a Royal Air Force Squadron's successful raid on a Hamburg shipyard. It struck him as strange and uncanny because it was an exact recreation of what he and Brandt had witnessed 11 years ago. We've discussed accounts of people who happened to go through time or witness time travel without doing anything, but one man was very determined to make something out of his time travel experience, traveling back in time to become an overnight Melonier. The Federal Bureau of Investigation arrested a man known as Andrew Carlson on January 28, 2003, on suspicion of insider trading. The suspicion was justified because, in just 2 weeks in the stock market, Andrew could go from having $800 to a staggering $350 million. He was said to have made 126 high-risk trades without breaking a sweat over a single penny. It was almost as if he had the Midas touch, as everything he touched seemed to turn to gold. Making the kind of profit he achieved in the stock market in such a short time was thought to be impossible. This made the Securities Exchange Commission extremely suspicious, and the FBI was called in to arrest and investigate him for fraud and insider trading allegations. Things took an unexpected turn when the FBI questioned him while he was in their custody. He told them he was a future man from 2256. He claimed that because he was from the future, he knew exactly how stocks would perform, which was why he could make so many profitable deals. Carlson also claimed to be able to prove his time-traveling powers by providing details about the whereabouts of the wanted terrorist Osama bin Laden and the treatment for AIDS. The cops did not think he was telling the completely natural truth. Although they believed he was kidding or lying, Andrew appeared to vanish completely from the face of the earth shortly after his release. Despite many efforts by the feds to locate him, every search turned empty. It is interesting to note that Andrew Carlson wasn't an overnight sensation. But strangely, his story starts with his unexpected appearance in the early 2000s. Before then, there were no records indicating that he was ever alive. He had no birth certificate, school records, medical records, driving license, or anything else. Many, however, have claimed that he could not have been a time traveler because he could convince the feds of that fact while he was under their custody. Some believe he was just a very good scam artist who could evade the government and anyone looking for him. However, here's an interesting fact. He correctly predicted the exact date of the US invasion of Iraq. What are your thoughts about the man who successfully undertook time travel? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to see more videos.